Hey, friends. Welcome to another episode of Space for Life. And this is one that I'm really excited about and also a little intimidated by, because I'm always, frankly, a little bit uncomfortable with talking about anything that is a little bit about me. But this month, October 2024, is the 4-year anniversary of the launch of Space to Breathe Again.
Woohoo.
Yeah, hard to believe. 4 years ago, launched my first book, and only book at this point, Space to Breathe Again. And so I thought it was a great opportunity. When we launched the book back in 2020, we were right in the midst of COVID, which was a terrible time to launch a book. But so much has transpired since then, and I've learned so much. So I thought this month would be a great opportunity to talk about the core concepts that I still deeply believe are life-changing concepts that are behind Space to Breathe Again. And so towards that end, I brought in my really good friend, Steve Perkins, to help me and engage with this conversation. Steve is a coach, entrepreneur, close friend that we've done a lot of episodes. We actually started our whole podcast world together, which is amazing. And he has really walked with me through the whole process of before the book was even written, all the way through the launch. We've shared so many times, breakfasts, lunches, talking about the concepts. I know you share so many of the concepts, in your coaching of individuals and even companies. So I thought you would be the perfect person to kind of help me along in this conversation and the kickoff 4th anniversary of Space to Breathe Again. So welcome back, Steve.
Yes, back in the saddle together. I was so excited to get this invite from you because you kind of alluded to it there, but some of our early conversations when we started getting to know each other are truly some of the first seeds that led to your book, to the company I'm running now. Like, so many things started not exclusively coming out of those conversations, but they definitely led places. And I was thinking about the threads of how things weave together over time. So this is really fun. And also worth mentioning, you are running a special on the book for this relaunch, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I am kind of excited about this. After a while, kind of the book, it almost becomes something that for me feels like history. But I thought, this is a great opportunity to kind of just reintroduce the book. So on Amazon, both the soft cover copy and hardcover copy, I'm putting on sale for the entire month of October for $9.99. So pretty good price for the book,
steal.
I think.
Yeah,
a good steal. And one of the things that I think because of COVID didn't get the kind of traction that I hoped for is using the book Space to Breathe Again as a resource for small groups. When we enter into conversations about, the struggles of overload and stress, and we enter into conversations about the things we're trying and working to do this with other people, it's such a powerful venue. So in addition to kind of the good price for an individual copy, if anybody wants to buy 5 or more copies, I'll make it available. They can just email me directly at tommy@tommythompson.org. Make it available directly at $8. And then Patricia Clark and I actually wrote a study guide for it that makes the whole thing into a nice, neat 8-week study that anybody can kind of do without necessarily being a small group leader. It's a great way of framing it. So as long as copies of those study guides go, I'll package both the book and the study guide for $8 a copy. Anybody interested in buying 5 or more?
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'll add to it that I've had some conversations with people just in the context of family, especially since me and a lot of my friends have little kids. there's so much we're trying to sort through around creating space as it relates to our time together as a family, technology, all of these pieces. And I think there's been a lot of good conversation that have come out of this book around what does it mean to create that space, not just individually, but together and helping each other. Because I think one of the things that you did well in this book, Tommy, is, and you do it all the time, but you talked about it in a freeing way, not a guilt adding way. And I think so much of this topic and our overwhelm and our burnout and our all the things these days is there's such a guilt around it. Like I need to try harder. I need to do things different. And it's adding to the already overwhelmed plate to have more guilt.
Yeah.
And so I think the way you talk about it is helpful for creating discussions with friends, with family, because it's more of a freeing and a lightening tone.
Yeah. And I really think, I mean, if I were to, I think the message is needed at every season of life. But if there was one season that it becomes absolutely critical, it's in the years of young families, because the number of pressures are multiplied, like it feels like exponentially. And so, if young families, people, that are raising their kids can begin to enter in and just get just a little victory, it can be the game changer for the whole years of, raising your kids, and can, I think, actually have a profound difference on their lives. So,
Yeah.
So I love what you said on that.
Well, if you'll let me, I kind of want to take the reins and guide us through this thing. Go back to the olden days.
That's great. That's a little scary.
For anyone who's not a longtime listener, Tommy and I started a podcast together that it was kind of born out of our breakfast conversations where we were really enjoying them. And it felt like good stuff that we were talking about, that we were like, it would be great if other people could enter into these conversations. So we started trial error podcasting together with Drew Daniels and Joe Wise.
Yeah.
And it's just fun where it's come from there. And so if you'll let me, I want to maybe do some throwback here and kind of not interview you, but let you speak more than you normally get to.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love it.
So I think one good place to start is like life since the launch of the book. And I can't believe it's 4 years either. That I keep checking my calendar, like there's no way it's been 4 years. But maybe just give a picture into what it's been like, because that's a huge undertaking to write a book. You pour so much of yourself into it. You go so deep in the topic. I'm sure it starts to feel like another part of you.
Yeah.
And then it goes out there. It's such a weird process that it's like all of that. And then one day it's launched and it's done and you're not doing the project anymore. What has life been like since?
Yeah, it is kind of a strange process. When you write a book, there's this kind of expectation or image around it that, you're an expert on this topic, that you got your act together, at least in this one particular area. And so, you go through everything to think through and do the deep dive, and you just learn so much just through the process of going at it that hard to try to capture all this. And you get all this process, and then by the time of the book launch, you actually can convince yourself that you've got your act together and that you do understand all of this.
Yeah.
So, the book launch was amazing, but contrary to what you said, once the book is launched, instead of it kind of just being something that's over, it's actually just begun, because that's when you have to do all of this extra stuff to try to get the word out there.
That's right.
So for me, it was kind of just post book launch that I really got more seriously into the podcasting, that I was blogging regularly, that I was still kind of building and doing a lot of coaching and mentoring. And of course, you have to promote the book, which is hard to begin with, but that throws you all into all of the social media stuff. So what kind of what I got a big dose of humble pie kind of after launching the book, because within a year of launching the book, I was completely overloaded and overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yes. I remember a coffee meetup where it was like, all right, so how's it going? And it was just both of us were in that place of, okay,
Yeah.
too much going on.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just like the initial days of learning about margin. It was too much of a good thing. Everything I was doing was good, and it was too much of a good thing. And I'm kind of like big into goals. So, one of my goals for it might have been 2021, right after the launch, was do less, go deeper. And it was already feeling the overload and overwhelm of the book. And so I thought, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the course correction I need to do. And I got through about half of the year, and I was utterly failing at that goal. I went, what's going on? This is my one thing. I'm giving it attention, but I didn't know what to stop. I didn't know, because these were all good things, rewarding things, encouraging things. And this is important, ego boosting things. And so I couldn't figure out what to stop. And so the problem was just getting bigger and bigger. The podcast was taking more time, the coaching, I was building more clients during the time, and things were getting more and more out of control. And so instead of doing less, going deeper, I was doing more and going shallower.
Yeah.
And I tried to figure it out. And I literally spent the first 9 months of the year figuring it out, trying to figure it out. For a while, I thought, okay, I'm just going to stop the podcast. Someone would come up and say something about what a difference it was making. Say, oh, I'm going to stop blogging. Someone would say something there. And then I'm going to stop the coaching. And it was like at each turn of saying, I'm going to do this less, God was saying, nope, not that. And finally I was going, I don't know what to do. And then it was a night I will remember, October 31st of 2021. My dad, 96 years old, lived an amazing life, had been in decline that kind of third quarter. And on October 31st, he died. I remember getting the word at 6:00, and I sat up all night and just thought about him. It wasn't so much grief because he'd lived such a good life, but I just was so reflecting. I literally could not go to sleep the whole night. And then it was like this moment, one of those rare times that I felt like I heard the word from God. It was like, I want you to stop it all. And it was like this moment, it was this aha moment of God was calling me to a year of Sabbath, a year of what I called a year of Jubilee, a year to stop and reset. And I didn't wake up. I was still awake at 4:00 that morning. I walked down to my basement where I am right now and wrote a blog and said, I'm taking a year of Jubilee starting right now. And then I went to my Bible for my morning time, and I happened to be turning to the story of Abraham. And Abraham's call, when he was called by God to go to a place I will show you, the verse immediately before that was and Abraham's father died. And then God called. And it was like God just spoke and said, this is what I want. You don't know where this is going. I'm not going to tell you where this is going, but I want you to stop. And I realized that this was this amazing gift that God was giving me of freeing me from the same kind of clause that had happened 30 years earlier of being overloaded and overwhelmed with good things. And God was calling me to take a pause. And so, interestingly enough, the whole process of writing that book led me right back into marginless living and to now relearning, these core lessons.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I wanted to do this relaunch, because I am more convinced than ever that this is kind of the core substance. This is the core ingredient by which we find life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that. It strikes me because you and I both kind of work in these spaces where it seems like almost a subtopic. Like, yeah, creating margin, creating space sounds good. I'll get to that after I do all the things on my list. But it actually is such a core central thing. And it's hard to realize it until you have a moment like you just described.
Yeah, it's the ground underneath us, and it's whether that ground is solid and allows us to move, or whether we just kind of constantly, up to our knees in mud, still trying to survive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the number of conversations I have with companies and leaders like, oh, well, this thing that we're, this initiative or this thing we're working on isn't working. And you dig down and 100% of the time, the true root cause is they're too busy to actually give it time and attention.
Yeah.
It's never all the other reasons we give it. It's just a matter of time. But I'm curious, can you put your finger on what was it that like made you get back in, like sucked back into the spiral again? Was it just a habit? Was it just a thing of habit, or how did that?
Well, it's a little bit kind of like I talk about in the book. It's a combination, it's a confluence of both external and internal things. I mean, the reality was I had a really busy life. I had a lot of things that I was juggling, trying to do things. So the very launch of the book created a mountain of activity that had to be managed well. So there were external circumstances that contributed in a big way, which is true for so many of us. It's not just that we're weak human beings. We also have lots of things that are sticking us in this riptide. But on the other side of the equation, what I didn't realize until I committed and immersed myself in this year of Jubilee is that I'd gotten really caught up in identity issues. All of a sudden, with the launch of the book, particularly, I was an author. I was now a podcaster and a blogger, and I now was a big deal. I wasn't, but that's what it felt like. And that honestly, that ego boosting, that identity became something that was very important for me to protect and build and try to enhance. And that isn't all bad or whatever, but it kind of became its own little prison because it's like we have with so much of social media. We get caught up in follows and likes and thinking that, what we're doing is important. And so the identity issues kind of around this launch of the book and writing a book, and all of a sudden, you meet someone, they say, "What do you do?" Well, I'm an author. It honestly kind of got its claws in me. I hate to say it. It's uh, kind of pitiful in a sense to admit, but that is the reality of what happened. And that's why the Jubilee was important for me, because all of a sudden I cast that aside, and it was now not primarily about what I do, but about who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, where the core freedom in life comes, is when it's more about who we are than what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what we do proceeds out of who we are, but the core is who we are. And I needed to relearn that lesson again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's a pitiful place to get sucked into at all, because whenever we put ourselves out there in any way, it becomes something that you're very concerned about and thinking about how it shows up and how others interact with it. And then for you, I'm the same way. There's also you want to help people. That's why you're doing all this. And so then there's a layer of, I want it to help people, which it puts more pressure on on the performing.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I really believe and have believed in what I'm doing. I mean, one of the incredible joys of this season of life of the last, you know, 7 to 8 years is I'm getting to spend virtually all my time doing things that deeply matter to me, that I believe I have the possibility of making an impact. And that is, I mean, that's a rare thing for people to ever have in life. So I I love that piece of it.
yeah,
But I could also see that other side that was kind of just it was kind of getting it to a place that it didn't need to be. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't quite see it.
sure. Yeah. I've experienced such similar things the past few years. Just, you had this moment that was like, stop everything. And I feel like I've had a slow unrolling version of that for several years, where it's this sneaky thing that this very, very sneaky thing that kind of gets in there, creeps in there unnoticed, which is, well, we're trying to grow and engage in our faith more. And so the natural, especially as Americans and high achiever people, it's like the natural tendency, then the next logical thought is, well, I need to do more things.
Right.
And a lot of those things are good things. And so next thing you know, you find yourself in this place where the identity is built out of, okay, what I believe and what I do,
Mhm.
and not actually who I am. And it was interesting. I was talking to a friend the other day, and because this has been something that I've been noticing more and growing in my life, I'm becoming attuned to hearing someone talk in a way that you can hear how much they're tangled up in thinking they got to do all this stuff. And he was talking about all the things he had to do, and they were all these were all like spiritually related tasks. It's like being involved in this and being in this group, and praying, and all of these things that are great things. But you could almost hear the burnout in his voice as he talked about the things, which it's,
So remember that.
and I relate to that so much. It's so ironic. And I've started seeing it, and I didn't before. And so now I'm seeing it for him, and I'm going, oh my gosh, you just need to stop it all. It's almost like the thing that you heard is this theme that could just run through for everybody. Like, you don't need to do any of that. And God doesn't need you to do any of that. But there's this, you could hear it in his voice, like this belief that if I stop any of this, then everything's going to crumble. These people
Yeah.
need me, right? Like, God needs me to do this stuff, right? And it's when you really kind of, at least for me, when I've interrogated those beliefs and thoughts, at the root of it is like, no, actually, he doesn't need me to do all of that stuff and burn myself out in the process.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of the big themes that just kind of thought about this, in the New Testament is that, Christ came to give us freedom. And yet we so quickly get into bondage. And
Hmm.
it's just like you said. I love the way you said it. It sneaks up on you. It sneaks up on you, and you're going along, and just you add just this little thing here and this little thing here, and this person kind of plugs your ego, and you get feeling this little thing, and all of a sudden you're caught. You're caught
Hmm.
in the web. And God means for us to have freedom. And that's just almost too good for us to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked about it, I think, on your podcast before, but I'll never forget. This is, I guess, 8 years ago now. And you said, I was explaining to you the way my friend was the other day, my overwhelm and all the things. And I was particularly talking about mornings, how there's such a long checklist every morning. And you just looked at me and said, then stop praying. It's so interesting. It's so interesting that, like, so in my story, you got to be the God figure. But that's what you said. You said, just, okay, then if all that prayer stuff, Steve, is so overwhelming and it's a to-do list, sounds like it's a to-do list to you, which is not what it's supposed to be, then what if you just stopped? And I remember kind of the internal gasp, like, what do you mean? That what do you mean? This thing that my whole life has been, no, do more, and trying to get better at it. You're just saying, stop it, stop doing it. That seems very backwards. And you're supposed to be my mentor. So what are you doing?
Failed at mentoring.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, of course, it led to so many good things
Yeah.
because I was actually coming to it in the complete wrong posture.
Sure. And it's just straight out of the Psalms. Be still and know that I am God, and yet we resist that so much. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would say is like the identity thing? To me feels like a foundational piece.
Well, it was the place that I came to as I began to enter the year of Jubilee to say, okay, this is the reset that needs to happen in my heart. It was important. And I want to say, because I think it's important to say, I'm constantly doing this reset. If I learn nothing from launching the book and falling right back into the problem, is that this whole process, this whole work of creating space to breathe again is an ongoing journey, not an arrival. So
Mm.
I am still, and I think I will until my dying breath, I'm going to be figuring this out and trying to learn and constantly, I'll come back to this word, but dancing towards trying to figure out how to live a full, abundant life that is still um, full of space,
Yeah.
spacious life. So, it's a constant process. But what that's done is it's led me back to a couple of what I think are core foundations that I have learned for me need to be present in my life in every season of life. Whether I happen to be in a spacious season, whether I happen to be in a incredibly stressful season or an incredibly busy season,
Hmm.
and these foundations become kind of the set point that keep me from veering too far off track. So there are a couple, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of put them out there because I think they're somewhat universally true, or at least in our culture.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
and yet most of these are probably not practiced by many people. So the first one for me is I need time every morning. I need what I would say is a little bit of spacious time to set and center myself.
Hmm.
I do that with God, but I also do that with my schedule. I do that with journaling, but I need to start the day well every day.
Well, you said an important qualifier though. You said spacious time. And I actually think it's worth digging into for each person what that spacious part means,
Yeah.
because I've noticed the place. So for me, like physically where I'm at matters, and the time of the day matters. And it's not always going to be perfect, but the more I can kind of dial that stuff in, the better that time feels spacious. And for example, in the morning, I've got a little kid and we both run businesses, and it's a little chaotic, and you know, there's going to be noise and there's going to be stuff happening. But I've noticed that in one room of the house where I used to sit, you can hear everyone's footsteps and banging, and you can hear the TV and you can hear the microwave go off, and all of those sounds start to kind of like ping ping me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
I'm getting behind. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I didn't used to notice. And I started noticing, oh my gosh, it even makes me tense up. And it's suddenly that time isn't spacious anymore. So I switched, and I've been sitting in a different room where I don't hear all those noises. And it's like, that's what I mean by those tiny shifts that actually make it more what you're talking about than just time. You said spacious
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And it is it's a great point. There are different elements, the actual space that it happens, a little bit of what you do and how long you do it. And there isn't, I think, to your point of hopefully not prescribing things, there isn't a magic amount of time or a specific things that you do. But what I've realized is that there's an amount of time and a place where I can feel my spirit settle and calm for what's ahead. And for me, the amount of time it takes to be there has actually been different over the years. I mean,
Yeah.
times 15 or 20 minutes might be plenty. I have a luxury, or I actually create the luxury now of taking a lot more time for that. But there isn't anything magic, but there's a place, an amount, and a way whereby you're able to catch your breath
Hmm.
and to start with your head and your heart and your spirit in the right place. That's what that morning time is about. So to me, that's a critical element that virtually every day of the year, I have that, 360 out of 65. It's that important to me.
Yeah.
A second element that has become more and more important over the last 5 or 10 years is a weekly review. One time, a period of time where I stop and I reflect on the week back. I think about the week ahead, what's important, what I want to do. And I literally look and read my core documents. That is my mission statement, my guiding principles, my future vision, these things that are my core documents. I just reread them
Yeah.
every single week. And it is unbelievable. It's a bigger time picture being, every 7 days. And it gets me out of the weeds because a day is a weed, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So a week is a little bit out of the weeds. And I have found that to be so helpful for keeping life in a purposeful, meaningful place.
Yeah. Well, this one's one of my favorites. And I think it's because the very topic of margin and space, we kind of tend to put it in this bucket of like, oh, that's like a spiritual kind of squishy thing. That's a topic over here. Then I've got my real life every day with grocery shopping and stuff.
Right.
And I just I just think it's amazing to have things in the grocery shopping bucket that apply over here because it is practical. It's
Yes.
very much a very tangible thing, but we can keep it in this like amorphous bucket. And then sorry for people listening, I'm waving my hands in two different buckets. But you know what I mean? It's this is one that makes the intangible more tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's very nice because I believe in it so much, but I don't even have to worry about what bucket it's going into. There are times that it kind of becomes a spiritual practice, but it's also, incredibly practical. Sometimes it's, about the practicalities, what I've got to do around the hills. I pay bills during that weekly review time, but then I'm also looking at my life mission. So it's kind of like I don't even have to worry about that. I just create the time and put a couple core practices in there. And it is so, so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. A similar thread, if it helps for anyone, is I've taken this same kind of idea into the work week and create almost, if you can, have blocks of time or even days that are for different types of
yes.
tasks, if you will. Because, like, for me, a day that is working with clients is a very different mode I am in than a day where I'm creating stuff like this episode. And to have to switch those modes all the time, it actually is something that reduces your margin because it's using up more of your brain power and more of your energy. And
Yeah.
so, again, I think it's like, oh, well, space to breathe again has nothing to do with my calendar. And it's like, no, it actually absolutely does. There's whole chapters about this stuff in there.
Yeah. In fact, if it doesn't have to do with your calendar, it hasn't got a whole lot of value. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, our calendar is where we live. And, and that's one of the things that I valued very highly when I wrote the book is that I wanted it to be intensely practical.
Yeah.
I wanted it to hit people and give people practical tips. I called them breathing exercises, but practical tips on how do I make this work in my life? Go beyond inspiration, in terms of it. So I hope that I accomplished that, in the book.
Yeah.
So
All
just
right.
real quickly, there were two other foundations that I just believe in a lot. One is practicing the Sabbath, and even if someone listening to this isn't a person of faith or where you don't really buy into the kind of the religious aspect of practicing the Sabbath, taking a day where you stop working just works.
Yeah.
It just works, and it is such an important foundation. And the busier I am, the more important practicing the Sabbath is.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm huge on that. And then the final one is I've learned to create powerful pauses in my life. I realize that on a day, even like today, that I happen to have kind of one of those wall to wall schedules. If I have powerful pauses in between things. If I give myself, 10 minutes in between something to constantly allow me to, no matter how fast I'm going to slow back down,
Hmm.
it is amazing how that can take an incredibly stressful, packed day and make it incredibly manageable. So if I spend the morning the right way, I get my head around the week, I take a day off, and then I find this way to create a pacing throughout the day, then I can manage even in the really busy seasons of life, even though we're not meant to always have really busy seasons of life.
Yeah. I was on a walk recently and someone stopped and said, "Where's your dog?" And I just kind of laughed. I was like, "I don't even have a dog." They're like, "Oh, okay." It was just weird that someone was taking a walk if it wasn't walking their dog.
Yeah.
Like that's the only reason humans walk anymore. So it was it really stood out to me as, oh yeah, because for me, one of the practical ways I've implementing these pauses as I go walk, because it gets me away from my computer or my, a different environment. It gets me moving, which for me really helps to kind of slow down and disconnect from whatever I was doing. And, whatever mechanism it might be for people, I think it's helpful to have all right, how, to your point, like, how are you doing those pauses?
Yeah. Well, of a whole lot of people that I know and I've talked with about this, I'm sure it's imperfect with you, but I have seen you in your personal life and in your professional life put so many of the practices that Space to Breathe Again is all about into practice in such a way that I go, man, if I had been where Steve is back when I was his age, who knows what I would have actually accomplished, which is kind of ironic with it.
Yeah.
But you have done an amazing job. I've just seen it over the years of taking things like some of these principles that I believe, and I know you believe to be true, but actually just putting them into practice. And it's
Yeah.
been really, it's so neat for me to see.
Well, that's why I can be on an episode like this and speak honestly that it has completely been game changing for me, these little things, because it shifted it started shifting my whole posture from I got to achieve and I got to perform for God and I got to do all these Christian checklists, which was very much like the mindset that I had always learned, to no, actually, I'm already good to go. Everything's already good.
Yeah.
I get to be wherever I am doing whatever I'm doing. And it's more of a receiving posture. And so, things like these pauses, well, for me, it was just the shift of, okay, I always experienced, and a lot of people have this story where my faith and that part of my life is separate from like my work day, for example.
Yeah.
And those are two different things. And it's like Monday through Friday, and then it's like Sunday's a different thing. And so it was confusing. That type of life is very disorienting. I'm an engineer. I'm a brain that's trying to figure out how things work. And I'm like, that does not make sense.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we're talking about and what's in your book, it just kind of, it makes more sense to me. Oh, this is how this stuff shows up even in my workday. that that to me is part of why it's been almost easy to implement a lot of this stuff, because it feels right.
Yeah. And, I had an interesting episode a few weeks back with Sean Boyer, and it was really neat because what he was talking about is, these principles that work in business work in my personal life, and these principles that work in my personal life work in my business. And so, and I've seen this with you that, you feel like you can afford to take pauses in your business. So there's this integrated life. And isn't that a cool thing? An integrated life, which is, integrated means one, kind of this one life, that crosses all these things. So you're not becoming a different person when you walk in the door and, with your family, and you're not a different person when you're out with your friends, and you're not a different person when you walk in your business. It's just one integrated life. I think that's really the way we're meant to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty freeing.
Yeah.
I want to loop back. You said something early on about, life shifts and changes. And you were talking about for yourself how these things can show up in different ways. I think you used the word adaptability, but speak to that a little bit, because I think that's an important piece to not feel chained down.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes to, that point that I was mentioning of this illusion that one day we're going to get it figured out and we're going to arrive. And from that point forward, everything is going to work, just smoothly with no kinks. And what I've realized is that life is constantly, constantly changing. We have new pressures and difficulties that enter into our lives on sometimes a weekly basis, sometimes a quarterly basis, where there's a real shift in what's going on with in life. You know, our kids all of a sudden now they're going to school. Our kids are now at this stage. Our business is at this place. Our parents are going through this. And so I've realized that what we need is both the foundations that help us live in all of these different seasons and the peace that knows that life is going to constantly be throwing us curveballs and sending us into new seasons. And those new seasons are what creates growth and depth in us. And so there was a little chapter in the book called The Work-Life Dance. And it was this idea that, you know, this striving after margin, there are going to be times that will work fine and it'll be easy and we'll go through that. And there are going to be times where it's going to be such a struggle. And so instead of feeling like, well, we're winning or we're failing, that we learn to actually become very adaptable, flexible to all of the changes of seasons. So if I happen to be entering into a really busy week, I don't have to say, well, I'll have to put margin aside this week because this is going to be a really busy week. I have the foundation to say, this really busy week is a beautiful week and I can still live a full, abundant life in this. And then next week, when it slows down a little bit, I'm going to just absolutely revel in that. And so the place of, I think, the greatest joy and effectiveness is when we learn adaptability to the seasons, which are going to change whether we like it or not. And so part of what I've learned with this Space to Breathe Again since the launch is that these seasons are going to change. And I haven't learned anything if I haven't learned how to build this into my life in all of the seasons and all of the places. And I'm still learning all that.
It's so good. I think that might be a good place to end. And you don't like plugging yourself, so I'm going to plug it again, that if any of this is resonating, or especially what you just talked about, the changing of seasons, I have the book on I have like a little shelf of what I'm currently reading, and it lives there because I have to keep revisiting what this looks like in different seasons. But yeah, would you just maybe remind everyone about the book deal and where they can find it?
Yeah, absolutely. Book is Space to Breathe Again, Tommy Thompson, and real easily you can find it on Amazon. It's in hardback and soft cover, also audiobook if people prefer to listen to it, or Kindle. So it's available in all those different forms. And I just love to get the word out there. I just feel like it's really important. So it's available on hardback, soft cover for $10 for the month of October, and then it'll go back to more normal pricing. Or if you happen to be in some group and say, look, this would be a great little 8-week, study going into the crazy Christmas time or after Christmas, then you want to buy a few more copies, email me, Tommy at Tommy Thompson, $8 a copy, and I'll throw in a study guide, one for each person. So, you buy 10 books, you'll get 10 study guides as long as I still have them and I still have it. So I just love to get the word out there. And I just thought, 4 years, it's a good time to kind of retell people about this.
Yeah. And another good idea is, because you were mentioning holidays, it could be a great gift to get the book for somebody, or just send send the link or send this episode to a friend if you've been talking about busyness and overwhelm lately. I know this is making me want to count. I'm sure it's over 50% of conversations with friends lately are about that topic. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I keep on coming back to it as a core for virtually everything that I'm doing. I realize it is that core. It's that topsoil kind of soil that creates growth in our lives, as well as kind of good fruit. So,
yeah,
yeah. But thanks, Steve. This brings back a lot of really good memories having a conversation like this together.
so fun. Yeah, thanks for having me join you.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. I'll try to remind everybody for the weeks of October of this, in a sense, relaunch of Space to Breathe Again. And I hope you'll grab a copy if you don't have one, give a copy to someone. And anyway, I just appreciate everybody who's listening. Thanks for joining us.